All right, sports fans, how's everybody out there doing? William Martin coming at you one more time here on YouTube with another edition of the 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge Podcast. So, even though that there was no pot of gold at the end of the rainbow for Ole Miss, this was still one of the greatest seasons in the history of their football program. But even with that, the folks in Oxford are going to look back on this one with fondness and sadness at the same time because things could have been better for the Rebels. You think about it, and you're not going to talk about this Ole Miss season without talking about the Lane Kiffin fiasco that, in my opinion, tarnished some of the season or tarnished the season for Ole Miss. As you know, we saw Kiffin walk away from an 11-1 team to join a conference rival in LSU. Kiffin wanting to coach Ole Miss in the playoff, and of course, the school told him no. We saw Kiffin allow some of the coaches that were going to eventually end up at LSU with him to coach this team during the first two rounds of the playoff, but not allowing some of them to join the Rebels for the Fiesta Bowl this past Thursday against Miami. And the abrupt way that we saw the Ole Miss season come to an end with the controversial loss to Miami. Was it pass interference on the game's final play? I think so. I mean, but honestly, the officials they did miss some calls throughout that game. Ole Miss also missed some opportunities in that game as well. But nonetheless, with all of that, 13-2, Ole Miss should definitely hold their heads up high. As the bottom line is, tough times reveal the character that either you do or don't have. And the reason why I say it is because after their head coach bolted, it would have been very easy uh, for Ole Miss to just roll down or lay down and just be done with it. Those kids fought hard. That coaching staff worked their tails off. Okay, and I think it showed in their preparation and how they went out there and knocked off Georgia in the Sugar Bowl, and then again they had their opportunities, and they came up just short against a very good Miami team. But now that the smoke is settled on all of this, what is going to be next for Ole Miss? Well, first things first, it's now the golden era for the Rebels, Pete Golding. And of course, he's 2-1 in his first three games as Ole Miss's head coach. And of course, he got thrust, it was baptism by fire, if you will, taking over this team during the postseason run. And I think, he's going to have an opportunity to hit the ground running from the standpoint that, hey, you know what? If you're Ole Miss, you want somebody leading your program who's committed to you. You want somebody leading your program who wants to be there. And I think Pete Golding really wants that. I think Pete Golding wants both players and coaches who want that as well. So I think that's the important thing. Naturally, in this day and age in college football, you got to have your NIL collective on point, trying to get guys in the transfer portal, also trying to recruit uh, high schoolers as well as the guys that you currently have on your team to stay. We know that the phenomenal running back Keywan Lacey has resigned. He's going to be a Rebel once again for 2026. Trinidad Chambliss, his eligibility looks like it's coming to an end as the NCAA was denied him his 6 year of eligibility. And at the same time, backup quarterback Austin Simmons entered the transfer portal as well. You also look at the defensive side of the football for the Rebels. A guy like TJ Dottery, who is returning to school, Centurion Perkins, is he going to join him? We've got to wait and see. But nonetheless, I think what Ole Miss definitely wants to do is to continue to recruit the state of Mississippi for football talent. There's a lot of talent in that state, maybe not quote unquote as fertile as others. But the bottom line is if you're Ole Miss, you want to keep as many top guys, high school guys from your state home, and then also try to branch out and get other key players to join your team from within that littered Southeast region as far as football talent goes, as far as trying to keep up with the Joneses, if you will, in the SEC. And I think now with the transfer portal, a school like Ole Miss, they're going to go out there and they're going to hit the ground running and they're going to do whatever they need to do to try to keep things up with the Joneses in that SEC. So you look at it because it was a huge distraction from for these kids and for this coaching staff with the whole Lane Kiffin saga. And honestly, there was an easy way for him to solve this. He could have just stayed there. Okay, but clearly he didn't want to do that. But nonetheless, I think now we're going to see this LSU Ole Miss rivalry be as intense as ever. It's one of those. I think it is deeper than when we saw Tommy Tuberville leave Ole Miss for Auburn once upon a time. I think it's deeper than when we saw Nick Saban come back to the SEC to take over Alabama after having a lot of success at LSU. And of course, sandwiched in between there was his brief stint with the Miami Dolphins. So, nonetheless, you look at it. I guarantee you, every person in the Oxford within the Oxford city limits and the surrounding areas, they've got September 19th circled on their calendar, and they've had it circled on their calendar from as soon as the schedule for the 2026 season came out. Why? Because that is when Lane Kiffin returns to town. Like I said, with one stroke of the pen or one plane trip from Oxford to Baton Rouge, Lane Kiffin just went from being the most loved man in Oxford to being the most hated man there at the same time. So I think it just adds another level of intensity to this rivalry. And guess what? I think that is because of that. That's going to keep Pete Golding in the hot seat. And I'm not saying hot seat like he's under on the watch as far as like he's coaching for his job. No, I'm saying hot seat because you know what? Ole Miss doesn't want to lose that game. We know about the Egg Bowl with Mississippi State, but they already don't want to lose to LSU. Now you really don't want to lose to LSU, not just in 2026, but of course all years going forward, especially as long as Lane Kiffin is there. And then on top of that, like I said, trying to keep up with the Joneses in the SEC. So if you're Ole Miss, you took some huge strides with your program this year. Who's going to be in that quarterback position next year for the Rebels? That's going to be big. I think Pete Golding is the right guy for this Ole Miss job at the time. He rallied the troops when they needed him to prepare for this postseason run. It was still a solid postseason run, albeit it did end short of the championship. But nonetheless, if you're the Rebels, phenomenal season. You want to build off of that, and you want to see what you can do going forward to keep up with all of the top dogs in the SEC. But folks, that is going to wrap it up. And as always, I want to take this time out to thank each and every one of you for checking out the 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge podcast here on YouTube. And as always, if you like what you heard and saw in this podcast, you know what to do. Just hit that like button as well as subscribing to this channel. And like I always say, it's greatly appreciated. Also, if you're on the X, formerly known as Twitter, you can check me out anytime at 300 Pounds of Sports. And like I always say, if you give me that follow, it will be my pleasure to do the same in return. And that also goes for Instagram, and you can check me out at 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge. Also, if you're on Facebook, definitely check out the Sports D5. And as far as I'm concerned, one of the better sports groups going on social media. But until next time, fine folks, my name is William Martin, and I'm signing off, and I'm saying thanks once again for checking out the 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge podcast here on YouTube. Be well, everybody.